Welcome to the AI for You Cafe. Today, our speaker is Pau Pamplona from Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona. Hello, Pau. With his talk on how user evaluation changed in times of COVID-19. So it's a very actual theme as we're still in the middle of this pandemic. My name is Carmen McWilliams, and I'm the moderator and organizer. I'm the director of the company Grassroots Arts and partner in the European AI for You project. As always, there's small rules in this cafe. Please take notice that this session will be recorded. No confidential information shall be shared in this cafe session. In this cafe, the speakers express their personal view and opinions. It's not necessarily the official AI for You or Helios or any other project opinion. So and the cafe is about meeting each other, gain insights into the European AI and social media scene. Participants get the chance to share knowledge and experiences and meet stakeholders from the different areas of research and development. And as you know, it's an interactive session, so the speaker will make a presentation. Afterwards, there is question answers, and please feel free to write us your questions. And in the menu on the right side, you will find a panel. You can write in your question. I will read it and afterwards to the speaker. So now we come to the most important point. Great that you're all here. Thank you. I introduce you, Pau Pamplona. I hope I say it right. Pau Pamplona. As his BA in Industrial Engineering, specialized in organization and project management. Tightly related with the broadcast, media, and creative industry sector, he has been participating in the coordination of FP7, CRP, and H2020 research and innovation projects. He's currently involved in Mediaverse, Rebuild, and Helios. Besides leading management and coordination activities, he also holds large expertise preparing and executing living labs and user-driven methodologies, being involved in medium and large pilots. His current focus at UAB, this is University Autónoma de Barcelona, is on social innovation and integration, user validation activities, and media accessibility. So this is very, very interesting and very, very actual. That's most important. I think everybody who's in the moment in research and development projects has the same trouble. How can we actually do user testing, piloting? So welcome, Pau. It's now you. It's your time. So I'll give you the moderator role, so you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm switching to presentation mode. Do you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome everybody. I mean, I would like to say that it's good to see you, but I think that current condition doesn't allow us to do that. But yeah, let's go for it. With this presentation about how user evaluation changed in times of COVID-19. Just a brief overview of the agenda. I will start just explaining who's my team, okay, who I work with. Also what you can expect from this session, and then I will just, move to what's the context in why we developed this presentation. That was like related to different projects that we are involved in. And then, yeah, I will introduce also what we were, what we plan to do. And then we had this COVID outbreak, and then how things change and how we are adapting to these new scenarios, okay? So just to explain you who we are, as Carmen said, we are from Universidad Autónoma of Barcelona. It's a university in Spain. It's actually one of the biggest ones. It was created in 1968. It's nearby Barcelona. Actually, it's not properly in Barcelona. It's in a big campus, as you can see here in the pictures, with green grass, very, very American style, we can say. And actually in this university, we do a lot of research. There are like small research groups within the faculties, which is, for instance, where I belong to, one of these small research groups. But then we also have like larger research centers that are independent, but are also held in the campus, that have like large interaction with the different faculties and the students and the community of researchers that we have there. So I belong to the Transmedia Catalonia. It's a research group that it's focused into audiovisual translation and media accessibility. But our focus of research evolved with time. And now we have like, or we can say that now we gain special expertise on user testing projects that are focusing on social transformation. And we are also experts in ethical management. So in several projects, we handle what are the ethical frameworks to perform research and so on. Here, I mean, I'm giving the speech, but actually, I just the project manager of 3 different projects, but we are involved in several ones, and I'm just somehow taking the word and the experience of my colleagues, for instance, Pilar, Stella, or Maria, that are the ones that we are like more tightly organizing these user evaluation activities. And I just tried, as I said, to summarize based on examples and tips or recommendations, how we are handling this COVID situation. Okay, so what you can expect from today, it's basically what I was saying. We had this COVID-19 outbreak that changed the scenario for evaluating and piloting. Our focus is basically on digital services. So please try to note that I'm not talking about social demographics studio research. It's more focused on digital services. And yeah, as I said, I will just try to give you some tips and recommendations based on our experience, and also on some desk research that we are doing, because we are still planning some user evaluation. So it's like, okay, what's the framework? What are the conditions? You have to dig in a bit to understand what you can do and what you should not do. And also because the situation is constantly evolving, we can say. So yeah, it's important also to keep an eye on what other researchers are doing. But yeah, let's first start introducing what we define as evaluation and what sort of evaluation do we do. And basically what we do is validating services and concepts. Okay, so we are not validating technologies. When we start our validation process, we tend to have technology that is already mature. So if the technology is not usable, we cannot bring it to the users. Okay, so our work, or yeah, our interventions start once we have a product that is mature and that can be used for users in certain conditions. Okay, and what we try to do is to understand how users perceive this technology. Okay, so what users think of the product or the service, if it's usable or not, in terms that the user interface, for instance, is accessible or not, or if they get lost, or if they find the buttons, etc. But also in terms of experience. Okay, it's not only one user interacting with a user interface, but it's like we have a community of users that are performing a certain activity which is related to a digital service. So how was this experience? How was the usability of this service while performing this activity? Okay, so that's the framework where I will talk, or that's a framework that I use for talking about evaluation. So the context, okay, it was 2019. We had 2 projects started that were Rebuild and Helios. Helios is about social media. Rebuild is related to ICT tools for migrant integration. And then we were also preparing a project which was Mediaverse. At that time was a proposal, and we had a lot of ideas and we had a lot of nice plans for these projects. We were in charge, or actually we are in charge of the coordination of the user evaluation. But yeah, then we had this COVID outbreak and we had to change plans. And that has been not traumatic, but it has been challenging, I would say, especially because the sort of activities that we normally do with users are of three types. Okay, so we have the lab test. It's just to give it a name, but it's normally when you have one user in front of this service or this technology and it's using it. And for instance, you conduct eye tracking tests. Here, basically, what we do is assessing the user interface and the usability of it. And that's one of the activities that we do, that we can do as UAB or that we coordinate, for instance, in the Helios project. Then we have these other sort of activities, which are trials. For us, trials are when you take a small sample of users and you have semi-controlled environment, we can call it, and you ask them to start interacting. And here is actually when you see how this digital service is performing, and you have a first insight of how users perceive this digital service. Normally trials, we tend to use them because it's a previous step before piloting. I mean, you cannot go to larger audiences without having first tried with smaller samples of users. It's a way for us to prepare the pilot, actually. So trials are very, very important for us. In terms of users, in our research group, we interact with different types of users, but basically we target vulnerable people, or at least in this project. Okay, as I said, we have a focus or a strong focus on accessibility. So we work with people with cognitive disabilities, but we also work with migrants or asylum seekers, who are people who have also find accessibility barriers, like language, for instance, or literacy levels could be also other burdens that we have to face. Then, of course, we have the community of students in our university. We also interact a lot with them. And then the civil society in general. I mean, as university, we have like a large network of entities that we cooperate with. So sometimes we tend to go to them and prepare activities to perform these activities. You can have but the same group of users, okay, but performing different activities, having different roles. So sometimes we have users that act as prosumers. So it's like you have to create content and then consume it and see how this process it's performing, the overall workflow of the content creation, but also of the content consumption. Or we also interact, for instance, with public authorities that provide services to the civil society. So, okay, this entity, this group of people who's providing the service, it's another role, or the citizen journalist, and so on. Okay, so this depends on the project, but here what I would just want to mean is that we have a wide range of roles and users that we tend to interact with. In terms of evaluation, we normally follow this approach, which is a very generic definition of the stages of how we plan, or how we plan the activities. Okay, so the first step is talking with your stakeholder. Let's call it your customer. Okay, so it's the person who wants to perform a user test and it's asking you for some information. So first we have this interaction and we ask them, okay, what are your goals? What do you want to understand from this app? What do you want to achieve? The second thing that we do, and actually this is a bottleneck, it's the inspection of the product or the service. Here it's where we try to understand actually how it works, but also here it's where we see if the service or the technology is mature enough. And this is very important because, I mean, if we are not capable of using it, or we don't see that it is reliable or robust, we cannot bring it to the users, as I said before. Okay, so this is a very important step where we sometimes have to stop the process and say, no, okay, go back, try to solve these issues that we found, and then we will move forward, because otherwise usability I mean, the research will be biased because the user is experiencing so many troubles that they cannot give you proper feedback. Okay, so it's distorting the overall image of the process. Once we have this plug and say, okay, now I understand your goals, we define what's the focus of the evaluation. And after that, we go to start defining the methodology. I actually have a slide right afterwards where I will get into much detail on this because it's interesting. But yeah, once we have defined the methodology, then we can start defining the activity for the data gathering. Okay, so what tasks will we do, how we recruit users, for how long it will last, what tasks they will have to do, etc., etc. Then, ideally, we launch the activity. So we execute the user evaluation that could have different formats. We gather the data, and then very important, we prepare the report. So it's not only a document, but we also support it with meetings and interaction with the people who has developed this service or this product to give them feedback and interact with them and see and give a more personal like feedback other than a report. In terms of a methodology, I would like to highlight or to stress 4 key points for us, and actually this will help me then to move to actually how COVID impacted on us. Okay, and it is the definition of the ethical framework. At UAB, we have an ethical committee, and what we do there is once we understand the project and the context and the sort of evaluation activities that we will have to conduct, we create this framework that is validated by this ethical committee. Then, and this is relatively new, it's the health and safety protocols. And actually now with COVID, it's even more important. But it's like, imagine that you have people, for instance, testing a VR application and they are using head-mounted displays. Well, you have to take into consideration certain conditions to make sure that they will be safe and that there will be no health harm for them. Then the next step, and here I will just skip it a bit because here we have a lot of insights, but it's definition of the evaluation test. Here, just as a tip or recommendation, is that always try to use the standardized methodologies like, I don't know, the system usability scale or the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, because just the fact of having to translate one of these tests or creating a test that it's not translated because it's not standardized could be a problem. Actually, it brings out of work translating one of these tests to make it standardized. So yeah, bear this in mind. Then it's also very important to understand what's the size or what's the size of the sample that you need for your tests. This is very important, but this normally depends on what I could say, the area or the field that you are working. If you are working on social demographics, it will be a large number of users. Instead, if you talk with an engineer who's developing an app, they will see the problem with less users. They can consider 80% of the app validated just with a bunch of 5, 6 users. Okay, so that's part of this step. And then reporting of the results. Actually, we put it here because when you're using standardized methodologies, you also know how you can actually analyze the data and report it back. So it's pretty helpful, and yeah, that's a recommendation. Okay, how things change, and here it's how I try to structure this second part of the presentation. Okay, it's like okay, we had this COVID outbreak, people was in lockdown, one country have one condition, then in another country the situation is different, figures are going up and down, but when you have to plan user evaluation, at least how we felt it is that the most impact happened in terms of ethics, user requirement and participation, and then on data gathering. Okay, and here we have the online versus on-site activities. And then also we'll keep an eye on technology, because technology actually in this time has been really helpful, and it's been our main way to keep performing user evaluation. Okay, so I will make some comments on this. So let's go to the funny part of it, which is well, funny, at least I would say that it's more interesting, which is I will try to give you examples and explain what we found out, or what difficulties we found and how we solve it, or just tips. Okay, just take it as recommendations. So, for instance, in terms of the ethical framework, when preparing user research, and again, I'm saying that we are focusing mostly on digital services. The processes and the frameworks did not change. So, I mean, you still have to prepare an information sheet. You have to preserve the users or the participants' rights. You have to make them be aware of the activity that they will be participating on, and that they have to assign a consent form. Okay, but there are occasions that these conditions might change. So here you have to pay attention. I mean, most in our projects, the ethical framework is not changing, but we are constantly checking that all the modifications that we are doing in the process still fits in this framework. Okay, so we really recommend you to do that. For instance, one thing that we realized, it was that in case that it's not recommended, but in case that you're doing an on-site meeting, it is necessary to track the users that have been participating there. So here you have to request them personal data. Well, if you are getting this data and it was not initially foreseen in the ethical framework, then you have to amend this ethical framework and make sure that you still are protecting your participants. But I mean, it's important because you need this track data, because in case that someone gets infected while you're performing this activity, it's your responsibility to keep track of it. Okay. Again, what I already said, that was like to check your methodology against your ethical framework. Okay, just to make sure that you're still within the framework that you define, and that you are not adding a new element that might be against what you were saying. Then, when moving to online tools, and actually I will give more details in the next slides, but we have to be very careful what data will users need to provide while using these tools. I remember at the beginning of the COVID outbreak that a colleague tried to perform interviews using WhatsApp, and it was like, okay, but for using WhatsApp, you will need their personal mobile phone, and that was not foreseen as part of the personal data that we were requesting. So we advise not to do it. So it's that sort of thing that sometimes for us are so natural that when you move and you start planning the activity, since we're not used and perhaps it was like new to us at that moment, you have to be careful. And then another tip, which is try to avoid voice recording and video recording. I mean, actually, there are several recommendations saying not to use audio recording, because it's with current technology, it's very easy to demonstrate or to identify people through this. Okay, so try not to do it, but in case that you have to do it, make sure that this is well explained in the consent form and that participants are aware of it. And yes, that's basically it. So then, in terms of user recruitment, well, with the COVID, obviously, it became harder. I mean, imagine us that we were used to have a large audience at our university, or we were interacting with other schools and universities, and it was okay. We need to organize a session, so perhaps we can organize a workshop or an info day. We have a lot of people there, and it's like, okay, since they are already in the campus, sometimes that they just pop in and you engage them. I mean, it was easier. Now with the pandemic, obviously we cannot do that. So recruitment, it's a bit more difficult, but if we are a bit imaginative, actually there are new ways. For instance, a lot of people have moved online. So now you can find like support networks on groups like in Facebook or Instagram, or I mean, a lot of entities have moved online that they were not before. So now it's easier to reach a wider range of entities online. So that's one of the things that you can do. Also, another important thing when recruiting is do not expect to recruit 400 users in one day. Okay, so it will take you more effort, probably like recruiting smaller groups from different communities. You should also propose like shorter interactions. But yeah, you will also, or most probably you will also manage to get like a more diverse community of users involved. Okay, so with that, what I'm saying is that although COVID made things harder, it doesn't mean that you cannot reach it, but you just need to be a bit more imaginative. And actually, one thing that we realized, and that's the nice tip here, is that people it's more willing to participate or to help in research activities, or at least it's been our feeling that we've been like, okay, we will do that, and people easily says, okay, I really want to do. I mean, personally, it happened to me, like known people of mine saying, okay, I have nothing to do. This is something different. I really want to help. And actually engaging has been really easy when before that was impossible. So yeah, don't lose hope. Then in terms of user recruitment, and here it's just this case, it's especially for entities that are working, for instance, with migrants or asylum seekers, be careful with them because they had to move very fast online. They are overwhelmed or actually overloaded. So collaborating with you might not be prioritary. So if you want to approach them, try to limit the number of interactions. Perhaps try to just cope with activities that they are already performing or that they already have organized, and do not try just basically to not give them additional work. Okay, for us this has been hard, and actually we try to take a lot of care of them because these sort of entities like NGOs are suffering actually now due to COVID. Okay. Traveling restrictions, yeah, and social distancing. I think that this is obvious, and here basically what I would like to highlight is that try to prioritize doing online activities. I mean, all governments are recommending not to do on-site activities, and actually doing them online, it's possible. But again, you will need to adapt. Then also another thing that we're not doing, but it's important to do it sometimes, just to check if there is already existing data. So perhaps you don't need to gather all the data that you expect because you can find open data sources that you can reuse. And then it's also important to think in the fact that, okay, we are now going online, but how this can have an impact on the sample of users that you are involving in your research. I mean, actually, we noticed that now engaging people above, I think it was 65, it's harder because they do not have, or they are not regular users as we are of, for instance, smartphones, or they're not used to make the same use as we are. So for them, it's a bit challenging sometimes. Instead, before it was, at least for us, it was easier. Okay, now I will focus basically on online activities, okay, online data gathering. So when you're preparing the activity, I mean, you have to think carefully how the new dynamics will change and how this will impact on your users. So when we are moving to online, we are adding additional barriers, okay? Before we had, for instance, language, literacy levels, or technical skills, but now we have even more barriers like, okay, Do they have access to connectivity? Do they have access to connected device, or do they have a tablet, or can they borrow the tablet to someone? Or can they lend the tablet, or do they need it for working? That's something that's important. And what I was saying, that not all of users are connected, so you have to know your users when you're planning your activity. One of the things that we recommend sometimes is if you are reaching users through third parties, is to talk with them and prepare this activity with them. They will give you a lot of insights, and they will tell you what's the best way to approach them. Another recommendation is to talk with colleagues that already performed similar activities, and what was their experience, what issues do they found, what were their solutions. So do it. Be prepared to adapt your methodology. So for instance, we had these two projects that were already defined and they were ready to go. And then we had this COVID outbreak and we had to adapt and change the methodologies. So stay alert with that. And yeah, I would say that this is the most important things. Just one final tip that we realized that was important. When knowing your users, think that not everyone is used to use all the platforms that perhaps we, the online community, are used to. So using mainstream tools, normally it's the best way to ensure that you have a good engagement. But when using these mainstream tools, also check that they are complying with the GDPR and that they are safe. Okay. We know of people that used certain platforms and that platforms were hacked and they were interrupting while they were conducting experiments. So yeah, just pay attention to that. Then when executing the online activity itself, just understand that what I was saying, not everyone is used to that platform. So you should take care of them. So what we recommend is, okay, before or just when you start the activity, make a sort of warm-up session just to see that the people get comfortable with the platform. You can explain them how to use it. For instance, a sort of onboarding activity that we say, okay, so now, so for instance, saying, okay, now mute, try to share your screen if it's necessary, turn on your camera, or okay, if you have technical issues, so use the chat and you can ask them, okay, now why don't you try to identify the chat? The chat is here. So it's good to spend a few minutes to explain how to use the platform, how the session will be conducted and so on, because otherwise they can get a bit confused and this will go against your own interest. And yeah, one very important thing is that do not forget the ethical procedures. I mean, if you're going online, normally you present the information sheet and then you have the user signing it manually. So if you're going online and depending of the sort of user that you have and how you have contacted them, you have to think of different ways to gather this signed consent or to make sure that they are aware and that they are of the conditions and that they can take part in the experiment and that you are following this ethical framework. Okay. And here, just very lastly, stay alert because constantly there are new tools that can help you in making your life easier when performing activities. For instance, here I just put a link to a technology which is called Realize, which is a service that through your webcam on your laptop, they are doing eye tracking. So it was like, okay, we can no longer do eye tracking with users because they are not in front of us. No, I mean, actually, a lot of companies made an effort to give new services to make sure that you can still perform some activities with no need to be on site. Okay. Then when you are performing group activities online, it's important to think on the dynamic. people it's not used to, or people might not be used to be in a meeting, so talking with you. So here is where we recommend to design dynamics during this online activity to make sure that all participants are heard, that if they are shy, just try to identify them and make sure that they talk with you. Another important thing is their attention. I mean, if the session it's like 30 minutes with that people interacting with you, you might lose their attention. So why don't you insert a moment of interacting, asking questions, or another thing that we are using if users have some technical skills, for instance, Jamboard. It's like, okay, so now we have this board, put your ideas here, you organize. It's a way of stimulating and actually can give like very nice results. So yeah, that was it for this first block of online recommendations. And now it's like, okay, we are trying to go offline, but imagine that you have no alternative and that you need, for X reasons, to do on-site activities. So the first thing, and this is a recap of what we said before, remember to keep track of the users participating. And here, actually, what we recommend is to try to join entities that already have a COVID protocol, that they are already tracking users, because otherwise it will make your activity very complex, and it will take you a long time to prepare everything. So for instance, what we did is like, okay, if we are working with NGOs and we need to perform a user evaluations, we ask to do these tests within the NGOs facilities, because they already know what users attend there, and they keep track of them, and they keep and they protect their users. So they have the data. You don't have to request this data, so you can focus on your activity, and it's way easier and actually safer. So that's one of the recommendations. And if it's not possible, you have to organize it. So check your ethical framework and try to get assessment from someone who is handling the COVID protocols on your entity, or yeah, basically on your entity. Or if not, you can go at government level and make the questions, and they will help you. Okay. Again, what I was saying, this health protocol, it's not only on terms of data protection, but it is also related to the activity itself. So what I think it's common sense, okay? So try to prioritize activities with just one user. Otherwise, just have like a small groups, very small groups. If you can do it in the open, it's better. Don't use a very close space. Don't make activities that last for a lot of time. Don't prepare a coffee break, because then they will have to take off their masks. It's that sort of thing. But again, we believe that with the current situation that we have now, organizing this is not advisable. Okay, so, but if you have to, just make sure that you're not putting yourself in risk, nor the participants in the activity. Okay. And finally, what I was going to say, it's like, if you organize this on-site activity, scenarios might be changing. So the first thing you should do is like, okay, track what's the status of the pandemic in your region or in your country, to understand if it's still wise to perform this activity, or okay, figures or statistics indicate that it could be okay. Also to see what are the restrictions posed by the governments. So that's what's the first thing that you have to do. Then also think that you need a flexible calendar. Okay, you can think of performing an activity in the day, but then unexpected things could happen, like that place has to be put in quarantine because there was a person working there that was positive and this has been an outbreak, or one of your participants, for instance, has been infected, so then you lose participants. So think on all these issues that might arise and think on backup plans. Okay. And I would say, just as my final slide, that here with this COVID, actually, what we have to be, it's flexible, adaptive, and innovative. And I know that this is like very typical of someone. I don't know how to say, but these are three very typical words. But now more than ever, it's important to be ready to changing the scenarios, and we need to adapt that to these new conditions. So we need to check what other people is doing, what new technologies can help us, and also be innovative. I mean, sometimes it's well, I think that with COVID, people it's getting very innovative, and you can have very cool ideas on how to still do user evaluation and with no need of risk, and skipping or avoiding the risk posed by the COVID-19. And yeah, just a final acknowledgement. Here you have some references, and actually, thanks to the Helios, the Rebuild and the Mediaverse project, because thanks to them, we managed to gather some of these insights and recommendations. And I would say that's it. So Carmen, I think this is it from my side.
Thank you very much for your deep insight. Yes, it's difficult in the moment to really do piloting. I would like to ask the first question, and exactly to get more concrete, as we are partners in Helios, and this cafe is in the moment like this kind of cross-project collaboration effort between these research projects. So now, concrete in Helios, what would have been the pilots prior to COVID-19, and what you imagine now with the situation COVID? What kind of pilots you imagine?
Oh, okay. Prior to COVID-19, we had a very clear scenario that it was our university. So engaging their users and interacting with users was pretty straightforward. Now, with the current situation, it's different. And actually, with Helios, actually, the project itself has had to adapt to the new scenario. So we don't know what we will be piloting because we are modulating the definition of what we are doing. But one of the things that we were thinking, or the ideas that we had, was it's like what we call a call to action. So it's like you identify topics of interest for your users, and you launch through the social networks of, for instance, of your university, and from there you can try to gather new users. But again, it is difficult because, especially in Helios, we have different services that are targeting different users and different moments. So it's a bit particular. But yeah, as a first insight, we can say that.
Yes, thank you. And what interests you in the moment? What you think is, because you are involved in a lot of projects, so what you think is in the moment hot in social media? What is basically, maybe it changed through COVID-19, I don't know. But
okay. Okay, I think that one of the most interesting things that I have found is this switch from the people of being used of the analogic world, we can say. I mean, it's amazing, but there was still a lot of people who's working in a very analogic way, we can say, where digital services are just WhatsApp or texting a friend, but actually they were not integrated in the workflow. And instead now they have to adapt, to switch to this mandatory online wall. They had not much time, but people have been like very innovative in finding new ways to adapt. So actually, when you are talking now with entities and say, okay, we are planning to do these services, I would like to understand what you're doing and how we can test this because I think that this could fit in your entity. And they start explaining you what they are doing. It's super interesting because actually you're learning from them, and then actually you are adapting, and you are not already doing any user evaluation, and you're gathering information that it's already useful. And then when you introduce it there, it's interesting to see how people adapt and have ideas that you would never manage. So people has become very wise and very innovative in a very fast way. And to me, that's actually one of the nicest things actually that we have now.
Yes, yes. I mean, including here this cafe, it was a niche idea in this research project, but became one of the major events now because there was no other possibility. So the cafe became a tool to let speakers present their research work. And so, yes, please ask your questions. And I have another one. Can you just shortly, for the people who are not in Helios, explain us what Helios is? And secondly, that's my key question always, how can we involve more external students, SMEs, developers, people we yet not know, into using either our technology, which is like in case of Helios, or altogether in social media? How we get more people who are not the typical students, scientists, but normal entrepreneurs, SME startups. How you think we can get them more involved in our research, in our social media research?
Okay, so first asking to your first question, which is what's Helios? Helios actually it's a modular platform that has a core of technologies that what they provide are basically communications services on peer-to-peer, but then they are enhanced or augmented with other services which provide like privacy. They also make recommendations based on trust. Then we also have other technologies that are basically peer-to-peer media exchange. So you can have from file sharing to video conferencing or video streaming and so on. And then there are other particular uses that are more oriented to, for instance, the use case that we have on citizen journalism, which is basically generating content in a distributed way, changing it in a safe way. And then also there is this model that was presented last week on the rewarding based on blockchain technologies. So it's like, okay, people, citizens are generating content and they are selling it, okay, and they're getting rewards and crypto money or whatever token do you want to define. So the good thing of Helios is its modularity, its capacity to adapt to new use cases. And actually, this is the key for knowing what users or how you can engage new users. So it's like you need good ideas on how to put all these pieces together. And once you have these good ideas, you can understand how you can bring new services to our entrepreneurships. So that would be the idea. So it's like defining new ways of using all this puzzle, and then out of it was just bringing it to the users and see if they find it relevant for them and if they are actually giving added value to their workflows or their work.
Yes, thank you. And I would like to now take this opportunity to basically end this cafe, but make advertisement for tomorrow. Because here we continue with the story. And tomorrow will be the speaker, Barbara Guidi. She's assistant professor at the Department of Computer Science of the University of Pisa, and she's also partner in Helios, and she will talk about blockchain decentralized social media. So here we can continue about the future of social media. And please join us all. And if you have questions more to Pau, please send them either to me or to Pau. And you have my email address, so I can just forward to you. Now I want to know from you, Pau, will you give us your presentation? I mean, will you send it to me or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So if anybody wants to have it, please also write me or Pau directly. And here's also a recording. So the recording I will send after the cafe to Pau. Pau will check it. Yes, no, I like it or don't. Then I may publish it on YouTube. And then you can also have the recording link if Pau allows. So that's how we normally go. And this is it. And I thank you very much, Pau. This was a nice cafe. And I hope we meet soon again in real world environment. So until then, have a nice afternoon. And everybody, thank you for coming today. And
thank you for the invitation.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.